Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you so much again for joining me here. I hope you're having a phenomenal day. Taking a quick look here at, of course, the crypto market overview. We're going to look at the net ETF inflow, NVidia earnings reports here today at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and just kind of see what that's going to do for us here. We're coming up to a resistance range there as well. I know we don't cover this kind of stuff in our crypto channel, but it is relevant because all the GPUs used for mining, it's pretty relevant in the overall sense of how well the market does. Most of the market, specifically crypto, hinges on earnings reports for NVIDIA. So we're going to pay attention to all that and much more. Be sure to stick around. Thank you again so much for being an amazing part of my life. Let's get our learn on. All right, folks, let's go ahead and get started with some polls first. I'd like to start off with some fun stuff there and just kind of see what your thoughts are. Crypto Twitter essentially is telling us 66% of you, basically 2/3 of you, are bullish or more so short-term bullish on the 116,000 happening next. Roughly the similar percentage here after 13 votes on YouTube as well. Bear in mind, I only posted that roughly 20 minutes ago, so it's not a ton of interaction yet, but the key takeaway here is majority of people feel like we're going to go a little higher. It's easy to think that because obviously we've broken our short-term descending trend line and we're moving into resistance range territory. So there's that. Anyways, that's the overall sense. We're going to go ahead and talk about that in detail here shortly, but just to touch on NVIDIA earnings here today, if that were to happen and we see a positive earnings report, then I think crypto is going to continue to push higher. Now, there's no way to anticipate what this is going to look like, but the key takeaway here is that NVIDIA does have a resistance wall that it's traveling into. But if you know anything about crypto and just traditional trading, they all kind of work the same. You continue to retest a resistance, that level is going to inevitably be broken. So at this point here, this level of 183 to 184, I think is more likely to break and for us to continue further higher. But we never truly know what's going to happen, but just keep in mind, this is a very positive sign in the overall sense here for the current situation for trading. And if you're not familiar too, a lot of GPUs are effectively used from NVIDIA effectively. So if NVIDIA has a bad earnings, then oftentimes, the cost of crypto is higher because of mining efforts and all that. So that's kind of where that factors in. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at the crypto market overview here and just kind of gauge that we're right here in this neutral to slightly bearish or slightly fearish market. That's a good place. Remember, you got to buy the fear and sell the greed. That's the concept there. So while we're not in a fearish market per se, a lot of fear mongering is happening on the crypto YouTube, at least from what I've been told from my community. A lot of my people in the comments are also mentioning that everyone else is bearish. While I'm not fully bullish, I'm just being realistic in the fact that the short-term trend here is up and we want to respect that. You don't want to get too crazy with shorting the bottom, which a lot of folks will do. We got to give this $112,000 range a chance to hold. All right, take a look here. Crypto net ETF inflow, in this case here, Ethereum is massive compared to Bitcoin. Okay, while we've seen larger time frames or larger ETF inflows for Ethereum, the fact is we have this shift in momentum for the last 4 days in a row where Bitcoin has only been basically slightly in the green for the last 2 days. That tells us that money is flowing away from Bitcoin going into altcoins. If you saw my video from yesterday, you'll know that there's some large whales that are selling all of their Bitcoin and putting it right into Ethereum. So we had about, 2.2 billion move into Ethereum from a 2.6 billion sale from Bitcoin. Okay, so that's quite a lot of money, if you will. Quickly to touch here, not too much to really recognize, but the key takeaway I would say is that we are seeing stablecoin dominance decrease. That's ultimately what we're looking for altcoins to do well. Okay, same thing as well here. We can kind of see a plateau from ETH and Bitcoin, which does imply that traditional altcoins, excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum, are doing well. So those are things we like to pay attention to. At this point, it makes a lot more sense to consider longs on altcoins. Speaking of longs, just to quickly clarify, we took a nice long from Dogecoin. What was that? I think it was 2.18 to 2.22. I'm off on the numbers there. I know there's a decimal point there. I'm misspoken, but the key takeaway here is we took a 25% profit. It was like a 7x leveraged long position. And yes, so you do read this correct. There is a new exchange coming soon. First of the month, I'll have that available for y'all. That'll be linked in the description below, and obviously some description too there as well. Let's go ahead and look at the backend data here for Bitcoin and kind of get some perspective and see where we're at. So Bitcoin is it's an interesting one here. We can see here that the top traders are kind of drawing dead here. We're seeing just as many longs as we are shorts, but they're using more leverage now. So in other words, we're starting to see a lot more margins being put into trades with the confidence level increasing. Okay, so typically when you see that higher, it's usually a good sign. Overall, we're not going to worry too much about open interest delta, but I do want to kind of clarify that we do have a significant amount of resistance in the 114.6 to 116K range. 114.6 was that previous high. was supposed to work as a new low, but then we had this manipulative wave down. Okay, so you can kind of see this. Here's the manipulation. Is that significant candle? Well, we saw like billions of dollars being sold in like under 5 minutes. That's whale number one, and then whale number two was back here. What I'm getting at here is that is a significant amount of open interest right there. Okay, therefore we're going to see exit liquidity. The price comes up there. People are going to want to get back out of their upside down positions. So that's kind of the case. And in fact, we took a long ride at that level, and thankfully we used low leverage, low position size, and we're averaging nicely for actually a profitable trade right now. So it's kind of crazy and weird how things can happen that way. But the key takeaway is that if you don't get too crazy with leverage, or use good risk tolerance, or risk management, however you want to look at it, it's always going to save you. It doesn't always work out. It's not 100% for sure, but your statistical odds are higher by being less greedy, essentially. All that said, liquidation delta here is still in the negative, right? So it basically implies that there's more people shorting than taking longs, more reason for a short squeeze to occur, but also more likely of further downside. So even though I'm tentatively bullish on Bitcoin, emphasis in the word tentative, right? We don't know if it's going to continue. While we have broken a short-term descending trend, we want to be mindful that there's a lot of resistance above the price. So taking a look here, there's some resistance there for us, or more importantly, just liquidation in that resistance range. 114,500 is that next area of liquidation, that big chunk. There's another chunk upwards about 117 as well. But we've known that 117 is that resistance range for us. So just some things to be mindful of. Good news is open interest delta here is increasing. We're at 49%. This is actually very helpful. It was at like 5% yesterday. So when that increases and we have our true retail longs coming down, that helps a lot in the overall sense there to provide us with a bullish type of structure. So I like what I see there. That is fantastic. So let's take a look here at the front end here for Bitcoin. Just kind of go from there, see where we're at. Once more, daily time frame's not bullish. I totally understand why people are bearish. I'm still mostly bearish on the macro, if that makes sense. We're still in a descending type of trend. Shorter time frames do tell us a different story, and with ETF inflows coming in higher, and kind of that normalization, that less manipulation, so to speak, we're starting to see some good stabilization. All that being said, there's nothing really here that's super bullish, not even remotely bullish. So I don't want to try to make you feel better just to tell you. I'm always going to shoot you straight and tell you how it is. And the macro doesn't look great for Bitcoin. But when you look at smaller time frames, you kind of zoom in here to the 4-hour time frame. There's a transitionary time frame. It tells us we're back up over our moving average. We've essentially established higher highs and higher lows so far. They're tentative, they're small, but they are present. We do have our previous all-time high at 112,000. That's that resistance range for us presently. Same thing as well with our local bottom. Our local bottom was 112.1. So we got some confluence there in that range. Once more, confluence, you want to trade on confluence and not just these random arbitrary Fibonacci retracement levels. Coincidentally, we do have our 0.382 Fib level there as well. So that's adding to it, right? That increases the odds of that being a resistance. But on the same accord, if you're just magically watching these Elliott wave theorists and thinking that they're right, they're going to be right because they give you 50 different possible scenarios. I mean, I could guess that many times and be right at least half the time, right? So anyways, the whole point of me mentioning that is that it's important for you to just be very careful and cautious in how resistance levels are tested. So until we break above 112K, we got to presume that's our resistance, and it's going to work as such until that changes. But smaller time frames do indicate, we got somewhat of a cup and handle type of pattern here. While this is a lower odds of playing out based on the bearish macro structure, it is still relevant and something worth recognizing. But by no means have we broken bullish yet. We're still under 50 on the RSI. We are back up over our moving averages, so that's good. That's kind of a trend reversal indication, but we're not fully there yet. Okay, so lower time frames, check mark, mostly good to go. Macro structure, not so great. Either way, I think from the bigger picture, when we look at everything else, there's a decent probability that we are going to see further upside from Bitcoin just based on a lot of the back-end data too. So those are just my thoughts there. What are yours? Why don't you comment below? Let us know. Love to hear it. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to Ethereum. Let's go ahead and check this out. Let's go ahead and refresh this guy and see where we're at here for Ethereum. And with the backend data, Ethereum is super strong. So I've mentioned this for a couple of days now. You don't want to short this coin. There's significant amount of open interest support at key round numbers, 4,300, 4,400, 4,500. In hindsight, I was waiting for 4,500 to be retested. It never did. And I'm kind of stuck now wishing I had taken a long in that range because I would have already secured profits by now. Having said that though, we can see open interest here locally at about 46.40. That's the potential new resistance for us, okay? But once more, that's consistent with Bitcoin rejecting off 112,000. So it really depends on how you look at it there. So the key takeaway here is that Ethereum is running consistent with Bitcoin, but also 2x of it. So it's going to pull back with Bitcoin, but it's going to respond twice as strong, twice as fast. And that's just the main reason why ETF net inflow. A lot of interest in this coin. People are pivoting from Bitcoin to Ethereum. And what's going to follow here in the relative near future, once Ethereum has a blow off top, is altcoin as well. Taking a look here, though, at liquidation long delta. It's not present. We still have more people shorting. So this does kind of imply that they're either going to have a really bad day here soon, or we continue to reject off this level and go lower. Obviously, both scenarios are present and potential at any given time, right? Big surprise, the price could go up or down, right? It's kind of one of those ridiculous things of trading. You can never be right all the time. All that being said, there's a little bit of liquidation upwards of 4,800. I'm still leaning more towards Ethereum running and continuing higher. Taking a look here, it would make sense also to see a bullish back to this $4,500 support range. So oftentimes you'll see previous highs working as new lows and a pivot and a bounce off that range. So I'm still interested in $4,500 long, right in that range, 4,550, 4,500. But between now and then, I'm not going to FOMO into an overextension. We're at a 9 on TD sequential. There's a solid chance we do see a short-term pullback for ETH. But either way you look at it, this $4,500, $4,600 range has a lot of volume there, therefore support. And once again, open interest at 43, 44, and 4,500. That reinforces support on the downside. A daily time frame is fairly bullish in this. We're honoring our ascending trend that's running consistent with the 20-day SMA. And if we kind of zoom out here a little bit, we can recognize we're over 50 in the RSI. All the important things are here. So this coin looks tremendously better on the macro than Bitcoin is and will be for quite some time. So that's kind of how it looks here so far for Ethereum. Let's move on to Solana. We do have an interesting cup and handle pattern. We'll talk about that here in a minute. It's exaggerated. It surpassed its 0.618 fib level, but the overall sense here is that there's a lot of open interest in the current range of 195 to 210. So truth is, a long in this range makes a lot more sense than any kind of shorts. And I'm actually eating my words here today, because yesterday I did mention that there's so much resistance above us, you want to be careful taking a long into that resistance range, which is true. That's how you're supposed to treat it. So I don't feel bad about recommending that. You don't take a trade into it, but I can tell you now that we're here and the likelihood of breaking further up is higher. We've shifted our delta from shorts to longs. Now there's more people longing this coin. And if we take a look, of course, at the back end, significant chunk of liquidation upwards of 216. So 216 was more likely on the docket there than we see the inverse of sub 200. Once more, Bitcoin were to pull back quite significantly, that might be a different story. But if we look at the daily time frame, still a very bullish macro structure, super bullish. We had an MACD FU here where the price action rejected off that descending that 50-day SMA, and then it's an EMA for the moving averages there for the MACD. Not super important, but the key takeaway here is that we're remaining above 50 in the RSI on the daily. There's a lot of reasons why we're more likely to go higher than lower. Now we can see this little structure here a little bit easier for the cup and handle pattern. Oftentimes the handles are supposed to reject off the 0.618 or 0.5 fib level, but we saw a pretty significant correction here from market manipulation when the price action pulled back. So whether or not it bounced off this level is irrelevant. It didn't bounce because it's a 0.618 fib level. It just bottomed out because the market bottomed out. It's a simple way to understand it. Now that we're here and we see the price retesting this range, a breakout to this 216 area makes a lot of sense considering there's liquidation up there. The short liquidation delta has shifted to bullish, and we're overall have a pretty good microstructure. So I really think that we're more likely to continue higher based on everything here. There's way more complementing factors that Solana is bullish than bearish. So if we get a lucky break, and this is another possibility, sometimes with cup and handles, you'll get like a second or a tertiary handle. So if we basically look here, there's a potential reality of a retest here of this $200 mark, and if so, we could very well see a bounce there, or even just a bounce off our local point of control at 205. So all in all, depends on Bitcoin for the most part, but at this point, I'm going to be interested in an entry consideration between 195 and 200. Okay, and that may never happen. So don't shoot the messenger, or don't get mad at me later if you don't take a trade because of it. But the truth is, I'm always going to err on the side of caution. I'm always going to recommend best practice. And if you don't like it, you're probably in the wrong place. Go check out some other moon boy that's going to post a 99% will lose on their thumbnail, or some kind of ridiculous, facepalm moment. Sorry, it just bugs the crap out of me when I see that. Okay, so SUI. Let's go ahead and move on. What's going on here? So SUI is, I'm still fairly bearish on this coin, and most indicators are going to imply that as well. But once more, we're starting to kind of come into that resistance range. So 350 and 380 are areas of resistance based on open interest. We can recognize liquidation delta is still heavy to the downside. People are more shorting this coin more than taking longs. Justifiably so. There's a lot of liquidation between 330 and 320. So if we do see 350 to 360 for SUI, I may be interested in shorting depending on how Bitcoin's price action looks in the next 24 hours. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Why don't you let us know? Take a look here on SUI though, macro, more larger timeframes. Ever since August 13th, we have been effectively, it's basically the last 2 weeks total, we've been in a bearish structure, establishing lower highs and lower lows pretty consistently. While we broke above that 360 for a little while, we had that manipulative wave down here, and now we can see we're slowly trying to crawl back up. But the key here is that 360 is that resistance range for the moment. And I think there's a solid chance we reject off that level. We may break our descending trend, but be careful taking a long into a descending trend break. Oftentimes those can be dead cat bounces or just manipulative type of patterns. I would say the general consensus here, though, is that we're bearish. We're under most moving averages. When we look at our larger timeframes, we can recognize too that our point of control is above the price. We have a lot more resistance above us. So if we break through 350, 360 or 380 are the likely two next areas of consideration for either a short or a take profit target on a long. But the 4-hour time frame, there's nothing special here, nothing to write home about. I don't really care for the SUI chart right now. I'm going to wait for a short in the 350 to 360 range. Once again, I'll reevaluate and see where Bitcoin's at that time. Don't just take a blind short trade. You never do that. All right, take a look here at Chainlink. Let's go ahead and see what's going on here. This coin has a significant amount of open interest. People are adding heavy between 22 and 28. More specifically, the $25 range. So we're starting to see this accumulation above the price. This adds consistency and potential rejection to the downside. I think that 25 to 26 is a new resistance level for us here. And when we do take a look here, we can see liquidation short delta is still growing. People are shorting this coin a lot more than others. And it's unfortunate, depending on what direction you're heading, but for the most part, there's a decent chance we go lower. However, we are in somewhat of a bullish type of rectangle pattern here. So if you see on this lower time frames, a lot of times the price will work itself into a type of rectangle, and it'll inevitably break to the upside because it derived from the downside. Once more, you never trade on patterns solely or alone. I talk about this tremendously or consistently in my videos in my community. They're helpful tools, of course, but they're almost always a late to the party situation. So just be careful in how it works. But at this point, way more resistance above the price. Once again, I'm going to stick to my guns here and mention that, 25 to 26, if we see that range again, it's a solid consideration for a short, because we might be in the beginning of another, I guess you could say that's a head and shoulders pattern. Super early, super premature, but once more, those patterns are beneficial to kind of add to the confluence you see in the charts. And right now, even though we are above all moving averages, we're seeing some divergences. We're seeing a lot more continuation to the downside potential based on momentous patterns and just consistent rejections off of these. Well, so far, consistent rejections is very premature, but we are seeing that we're staying below these moving averages here, and the 4-hour time frame is not remotely bullish at all. In fact, we've overextended on stochastic, and we haven't even broken through a key level resistance. Those are usually signs of weakness that I look for when I'm considering a short. So Chainlink, to me, seems a little bit more shortable than something to take along with. There's potential we could see it break out, but that's going to require Bitcoin to hit 116K. There's still a lot of resistance between now and then. Let's move on to XRP and kind of round this out here. I've included XRP and Chainlink on the videos now just to kind of keep it consistent, because some folks were complaining, oh, you're not covering XRP or you're not covering Chainlink. What's wrong with you? Nothing. Well, actually, how much time do you got, rather? But on the same accord, I just don't, I want to make sure these videos are relevant and concise. So let's just go ahead and get to it. All right, so taking a look here at $3, $3.10, $3.20, and $3.30. These are all just normal areas of open interest we talked about previously. I do think XRP will break out and continue to its 316 range. That's where our take profit target is on our long. We took that long just before all this manipulation happened. We averaged in nicely in the 290s. So I'm content with that trade. But the take profit target may need adjusting. We'll talk about that. But when we look at the short liquidation delta, it's still slightly bearish, but essentially breaking even, which is usually a good sign, a reversal sign. 315 and 316, heavy concentration liquidation above the price. And we take a look at the charts here, we have effectively, in a lot of ways, broken our descending trend line. We are back up above our moving averages, and with the exception of the 200-day SMA, right there at our point of control and just above our local high here as a retest of a new low. So those are ultimately good signs to look for. Typically, you will see the price continue higher because of that. Now, if we take a look at the daily, though, just got to be honest with you, this isn't super awesome. We got some resistance at about 307 with that convergence of that 20 and that 50-day SMA. We've got our what is it? This is the point of control there above the price at $3 even, kind of reinforcing that consistent resistance at $3. And we talk about the moving averages here. We're not quite bullish, right? So the daily time frame, we've got some divergences, but also some convergences too. And oftentimes I don't love to trade those kind of conditions. While we have a trade open with this coin, we're averaging to the green, and I always recommend you adjust your stop loss higher if you are in that trade. That's kind of the consensus there, because we never truly know where we're at or where we're going to be here. But with Bitcoin looking like it wants to continue to progress higher, XRP responding similarly to Bitcoin, I think we're more likely to go up here from here. Once again, just most of that is coming from these shorter time frame confirmations with added money flow index. When we have MFI increasing on the 4-hour time frame, that's usually a very good sign. So this has more signs that are pointing higher than lower. But is it a perfect situation? Is it a guaranteed winner? No, definitely not. So that's just how trading is going to work, folks. You better get used to that. Is just the way that it goes. So hopefully this makes sense and I described it correctly. Thanks again for being a phenomenal part of my life. Make sure you, of course, check out our sponsor, BitUnix, for the moment here. They're an awesome exchange. No KYC or VPN required. And we are, of course, bringing a new exchange to the community on the 1st of September. Just to provide you with some more options. They are very friendly in the European countries there. So, all right. All that being said, thank you again. We'll look forward to seeing you in the next one. Have yourself a great rest of your day. Be safe out there. Take care.